If you're listening and or watching to the Soundcheck podcast, and you can support us on Patreon, and just from £3 a month, you can get
exclusive content. You can get, for the premium package, you can get a discount on PR. You can also get priority on your submissions for Future Hits Radio as well. And gig tickets, stuff like that.
And first refusal for fun things like this, interviews, gigs, behind the scenes, some video if you want it. Shout out Kieran.
Shout out Kieran. So yeah, go and sign up at patreon.com/Future Hits Radio.
Welcome to the first episode of Future Hits' Soundcheck podcast. Today we are joined by Matt Wherry.
Hello.
And special guest Jack Foz.
Hello. Thank you.
And of course, producer, videographer extraordinaire Kieran Grantham behind the camera.
No, we can't. We need to get Kieran and Mike maybe for another day.
I'm not running around the room. And today we're going to be talking about putting on your own live gig and of course finding out more about Jack himself and your plans for the new year. We've already started talking about that a little bit behind the scenes.
Yeah. Just chatting a bit about what's going on next year, what I've got coming out and all that good stuff.
Yeah, be aware that everything we've already spoken about in meeting you, introducing ourselves, we're going to have to repeat.
This is all, it's actually all scripted.
Yeah,
so,
we've already practiced.
We didn't even have an intro.
Well, should we let Jack introduce himself, really?
Yeah, it'd be a good start.
Tell us about yourself, Jack, because I saw actually,
Go for it.
in our submissions form for Future Hits, futurehits.co.uk, submit your music here. That's what Jack has done.
Nice plug.
Nice plug. Yeah, it got to be done. With your artist bio.
Oh, God.
Tell us about your artist bio.
So I think for like my artist bio, I'm not a very serious person. Obviously, I'm serious about what I do, but I try not to take myself too seriously. So it was it's a bit tongue in cheek. It's a bit of like a recipe list, and then basically followed by essentially. Well, it might go all right, but if it crashes and burns, then at least it'll be funny. So it's like that kind of.
I can confirm from an A&R perspective, I found it funny.
Nice, nailed it.
Nailed
Not too
it.
cheesy, love that.
Not sure about other radio stations, but we loved it.
I think the thing is, though, when the music speaks for itself, doesn't it? I think it's a case that, when we're reviewing tracks that have been uploaded, I don't look at the bio first. I'm listening to the track first. And is that one not your process apps as well?
Yeah. But Jack's bio caught my eye.
Fair
I will
enough.
say.
To be honest, I can imagine like it's the same with like all things that you submit music for, right? Like normally the music is probably of like a fairly similar standard in terms of like there's a lot of good artists about, so it's anything you can do to kind of
stand out.
Yeah, get your foot in the door, sort of thing, So.
But essentially, it is the recipe for Jack. So, what is the main ingredients of Jack Foz and his music? Can you remember any of what you
God, yeah, no, you really put me on the spot here. I'd like to say it from like the list. I can remember the big ones, probably like honesty. I really struggle to connect with songs that I write if they're not somehow related to something that I've either experienced or something that I feel quite strongly about or passionate about. And that's kind of when people ask me how do I write songs, I just basically say the first thing you should do is just take something that you care about or something that you've been through, write 10, 15 sentences about it, and then sort of like Frankenstein those into some lyrics. And even if lyrically it's quite weak, as long as you feel it makes you feel something, then there's other people about that will feel the same way. And then, to be honest with you, I'd say the other kind of main ingredient, or at least people online seem to think, is probably my haircut. So,
well, that is in your bio on Instagram as well, isn't it?
True, right. What's it? Aspiring mulleted rock star that loved by your mum or something.
Well, you got to rock the mullet, mate. I don't see the mullet around too much these days.
Well, yeah. I mean, it kind of came in and disappeared very quickly as people started to realise it's a bit lame. So I guess.
Well, my dad's still trying to rock it, mate. So
love that from your dad. Love that. So me and your dad,
basically.
Nice, great, great. Glowing reference there, I guess.
Well, he'll love it.
There we go. At least one person.
Shout out Matt's dad.
Yeah. He gets a shout out quite often on everything we're doing.
He does.
So what we're going to do on this episode is to talk about a gig and how to put it together as an artist as opposed to going through promoters. But we're also going to ask you any horror stories you might have had with other promoters or whatever, or lessons learned, maybe is a better way of putting it.
Don't name any names because we don't want to have to edit.
No names, no names.
We won't.
Make your job as easy as possible. Can you bleep them out? Would that be like, if I like swear, would you be like, boop?
Yeah, probably.
We'd have to.
We probably will. But
so there's this promoter called...
well,
And
so we'll get straight into that part of it, because what we want to try and do is that with this podcast, we want to try and help people sort of understand how to do certain elements of being an artist, right? So with yourself, although when I was looking on Spotify and that, you've only seemed to have got tracks released from the last, well, since May, I think, but from this year, from 2023,
exactly.
at the time of recording. But your Instagram goes quite a bit further back than that. So this was going to be a gig question, but I've tangented.
that's not a word.
No, I've gone on a tangent, Abby.
Okay.
All right. So
same but different, right?
Yeah. So with that, was it a case that you weren't releasing music before May, or you've released music and then taken some of it off and then started again? Because your Instagram profile, as an example, stretches back much further than your music starts.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. It's so I've been like involved in a fair few projects, both as, you know, as like a member of the band, in terms of not like, it's not about, how do I say this? It's not about me, if that makes sense. But then I've also been in a band called Solar Strides, which was, we released music through them. So I kind of got an understanding for the process,
right,
whilst releasing music there. And then, you know, I've like done a little bit of session stuff and a little bit of like production here and there as well. So I kind of understood the process. But I think what kind of happened was I felt that the Solar Stride stuff was slowly sort of coming, it sort of lived its life a little bit. We're still sort of together, but we just haven't played for a while. And, you know, it's one of those things in life where everyone else kind of had other priorities and weren't perhaps in the position that I am, where I wanted to sort of pursue music as a more of a full-time occupation. And as I felt that winding down, I sort of was like, okay, this is what I want to do. Started setting up the Instagram, started getting things in place to get the ball rolling. So I knew that I wanted to release music and all that good stuff, you know, the stuff that I've put out this year. But I started the Instagram, and I think in 2021, and then started releasing in 2023. But the kind of main reason for that was to mainly sort of build catalogue. We were talking about this sort of before the cameras went on, but I think I always see my career as being, as in terms of like, where do I want to be at this time next year? So I wanted to be able to have this back catalogue. So I essentially took the pressure off myself, because I'm not one of those people that can just bash out songs. I can't, because I have to have this kind of like visceral connection with music. I can't just sit down and bash out something. So I knew that by having like this back catalogue, it would kind of take the pressure off me through doing that. And then like as sort of a byproduct, it would allow me to kind of be organised, because I am actually the least organised person.
You're in good company.
Well, yeah. So giving myself the best possible opportunity to be organised was something that I was quite keen on doing. I hope that kind of answers your question, because I felt like I talked for about 2 minutes.
Perfect.
So.
Makes our jobs easier. But no, it's interesting, because that means you've had to be quite patient, because I know, like, we've had loads of submissions from artists, obviously over the past 12 months especially, and they've just been like, it's almost like sometimes you get a demo, don't you, rather than a finished track. So it's almost like they don't want to wait until it's ready. It's like, get it out the door. I mean, you've been guilty of that as well, haven't you, as an artist yourself?
Yeah, you've told me just to do it anyway, just bite the bullet and go for it.
Yeah, I know, but
and then I've regretted it. So obviously,
so it's
taking
my
your
fault,
time.
Jack.
Yeah,
it's my fault. But but you've been very patient. I know, it's always my fault.
Yeah,
that is true.
Sound like my girlfriend there. It's always my fault.
But you've been very patient in releasing music. If you've sort of had that back catalogue running from 2021, and you've been building a profile online, to sort of gain a bit of a following and then release music.
I feel like, because it's such do you know what? There's kind of pros and cons to everything, right? I mean, if you're putting out music in its demo stage, I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that. But, you know, there's loads of people talk about, oh, you should do this, you shouldn't do that. I think as long as you feel like the music represents you truly, then there's kind of that, but that, you know, you can put it out whenever, really. But as long as you feel like it represents you and your brand, then that's kind of, you know, like, for example, if I was making like bedroom pop or whatever, it's supposed to sound kind of slightly, not, when I say gritty, I don't mean like heavy, but it's supposed
to be raw,
yeah, exactly. So, you know, you could release a demo of that, but for kind of what I'm in the world that I exist in, where it's kind of like that sort of pop indie rock kind of things need to be a little bit more polished.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like it took a bit more time for me to get something that truly represented the kind of sound that I was making or wanted people to hear. And yeah, that's kind of why. I think as well as that, like you say, you made a good point about building a brand online. I think that that's quite important to do before you put music out as well, because I mean, like, fundamentally releasing and making music is not cheap, right? Like, unless you can do it all yourself, in which case you have probably invested either A, time, B, money, or C, both. It's an expensive process, so you want to make sure that there's people there to listen to it so it doesn't fall on deaf ears, right? So that was another consideration I had. I wasn't like desperate to release music because I'd done it before as well, which I can understand. If it's like your first single ever, you probably get a bit giddy because you're like, here I am, I'm a rock star. Like, you know how
I'm a rock star now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm on Spotify now, you know how it is. Like, but yeah, there's just, I think, you know, there's just a lot of considerations to make, isn't there? So
it's a very mature way of looking at it, isn't it? Because I think that if you've got that plan, although you say you're disorganised, I think it's a case if you've got that plan for 12 months ahead.
You've learned.
Well, yeah, but I've only learned through making mistakes, right? Like, you know, the first ever song I put out hadn't even been mastered. So it's like things like that. Or, I mean, it had, but it was like a quick master. It wasn't like I hadn't paid anyone to do it. It was just the guy
emastered.com.
Yeah, well, the guy who mixed the song was a friend of mine, so he was like, oh, I quickly mastered it for you as well, so you could just put it out. But, you know, so he did me a favour, but was like, it was quite quick though. So, you know, it's like one of those things. So it's like, yeah, you've just got to, I think basically the short and narrow of it is, does it represent you? Flow diagram, yes. Put it out, no. Then it kind of expands off into...
Yeah. Why? Back to the drawing board.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's really cyclical in that kind of nature. Also, you're probably one of the first people to describe me as mature as well. So there's a lot of firsts going on here.
You're
organised and mature. So I'll take that.
Mum, I mean,
no, I know.
I made it.
Yeah, there you go. Shout out to my family there.
Love that. And what about gigging? Does that come into who you are as a musician and your branding and does it help you discover your sound and
for sure. For sure. I think that was another thing as well, is that I didn't actually gig this project until quite late.
Okay.
Excuse me. A lot of people talk about, you know, gigging to help develop your stage presence and all that. But because I'd had quite a lot of live music experience before, I kind of didn't really need to, if that makes sense. That makes me sound really big-headed. By all means, as I'm sure you will see later, I am not the perfect performer. I wish I was, but I'm not. But
it gave you that initial confidence to be able to just go and do it.
To just be able to be like, I knew that with this project, I could just be like, okay, I want to get on stage tomorrow. And I would at least know how to stand there and, you know, make at least two people turn around from having their pint at the bar. Like, do you know what I mean? So it's, that helped. I think as well as that, so if I didn't have that experience, I would have definitely gigged a lot earlier. I think something else that I found gigging this project is it really helps determine which songs to put out as well, which I've found, because, you know, the crowd's reaction to certain songs is not necessarily been what I predicted it to.
Right.
So like certain songs have gone better than others, and certain songs have tanked, and that's just the way it is. But yeah, I think that helps. And another really big consideration that I've had, well, two, is that when to gig with a band. So I do a lot of acoustic gigs, mainly because because this is a solo project, I want to kind of make sure that the musicians I get on board, I can pay them like properly.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So I tend to only get a band if I'm being paid like decent amounts to
Makes sense.
compensate people for their time. Like, I would feel a bit hypocritical sitting here being like, oh, Spotify doesn't pay me enough. Oh, I don't get enough royalties from all these people. Then going, oh yeah, but I'll pay you a tenner to come along and play guitar at my show. Do you know what I mean? So I feel like that's quite a big consideration for me as well. And something that I'm now starting to think about is the kind of argument of gigging all the time versus only taking gigs that will actually benefit me, if that makes sense. So, like I say, I do enough gigs that I kind of feel like I have at least a morsel of stage presence. Like, I can get up there, I can do my thing, crack a few dad jokes or whatever. But I'm starting to kind of really think about either developing my acoustic set. So maybe having like backing tracks, but not too much, so it seems like really cheesy. Like a level of backing track that's appropriate for like an acoustic set, or just kind of like simply being like, this is, again, it's an investment of time. Is this going to be worthwhile me doing instead of, like, okay, it's a free show, I'm not getting paid to do this. Should I take it? What are the benefits? What are the cons? Like the pros and cons. So yeah, I think I'm just trying to really think about the most efficient ways of using my time at the moment as well. So I guess that comes into it well again.
Yeah, there's definitely something to be said about balancing it out, because obviously you only got I suppose a certain number of fans. You think if you go to different gigs, different events, you're going to build your fan base, but then obviously you want the same group of people to be coming to those gigs over and over and over again as well. So if you're playing every other week.
yeah, of course. Like, I think that's another thing, right? Is that you want to sell tickets.
Exactly.
But if you're putting on a show, like you say, every week, then there's only a limited number of people that are going to be able to come.
Supply and demand, isn't it? If you're gigging all the time, people aren't going to want to come and see you as much because they're not going to be paying out 10 quid every couple of weeks. But if you are doing like gig, I mean, how often have you gigged this year as an example? Bearing in mind this is the first year that you've released music as a solo artist, how many gigs have you done in 2023? Bearing in mind this podcast is going to actually go out in 2024, but in 2023, how many gigs have you done?
I reckon... That's a good question. Maybe I think between 15 and 20.
Okay.
Oh, still that's more than I was expecting.
Well, actually, no, I think that's
I exaggerated.
I think it's 10, 15, I reckon. Okay. I think there's been a couple of months where I've had like 5, and then prolonged periods of time where I've had none.
Yeah.
So,
averages out.
Exactly. It ebbs and flows. Harder to find gigs in the summer because everyone's at festivals, like all that sort of stuff. And then as soon as it gets cold,
no one wants to go out.
Exactly. So, I didn't have a gig between the end of September and when I released Overthinker. So that's nearly 2 and a bit months. But then, in sort of April, May time, pretty much had like a gig every week.
Right.
So it's like, it really varies. But, yeah, exactly. So I'd say, as because it was my debut year, I probably gigged more than I've probably let on that I have,
right?
From what I've been saying, but I think this is more of like a 2024 consideration. So.
Yeah, well, so that's what I was going to say. Like, obviously, if you've over the course of the next year, if it's like, right, well, I know that I want to probably do a gig every 4 to 6 weeks or whatever. And you've got a release plan for your music as well. I guess it all ties in together. In regard, right, if I'm going to release a track in February, I want to be playing that as a track in the sets.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's like you say, it's all about that snowball effect, right? Isn't it? It's building momentum, and then when it's all kind of coming to a frenzy, then you go, here's what I've got to show you, and then it's all about momentum basically. So
with having a bit of a sort of a break in regards to, or not a break, but creating the brand and then starting to release music, you said create a back catalogue. How many songs are left in that back catalogue, or are you having to continue, are you writing in the process of releasing?
Yeah, so I feel like I'm in quite a good space at the moment in terms of I've got this back catalogue. I reckon at the moment I've got maybe 7 or 8 songs that are finished, that are ready to go out.
That's next year sorted then.
Well, yeah, exactly. So next year and potentially the year after sorted, unless, someone wants to sign me and I can release an album. But find my socials. But yeah, it's but then that can change, right? Like, a year is a long time. I could write better songs. I could decide that I hate things. So it could all change. It's basically, like I said earlier, just trying to make sure that I'm organised with it all. Exactly. Yeah. And I think I've touched on it briefly a minute ago. Sorry, I realised that I'm really trying to dump on you guys here. I feel like I'm talking for like 5 minutes at a time.
This is podcasting. They're here for you, not us.
But I think as an unsigned, momentum is the crux of everything, right? It is what you're aiming for is, number one, momentum, because it gives you things to post about all the time on social media. Number two, if it is something that you want to do seriously, it shows everyone that you're consistent, and that's fans, A&R, whoever. And number three, the best part of being a musician is being in the studio, writing this. Well, for me, it's taking this song from what I call like a song baby, which is like might just be a sentence in your notes or like a little voice note, and then playing it on stage.
Yeah.
So that's like the best for me. That's the most satisfying thing about being a musician. So I'm just giving myself the ultimate opportunity to be able to do that as frequently as I can, seeing as that's what I get the most enjoyment out of. So yeah, I think that's something. But then this year, to be honest with you, I think that so I've put out since March 5 songs, and I'm starting to think that might be too much.
Okay. So like 1 a quarter?
Yeah, I think that's probably, so like 4 is probably what I'm going to try and go for next year. I've just found that, I mean, it's personal experience, and like when I put out Casual, which was my debut, there was just like loads of hype, did really well off the bat. People really liked it. And then just suddenly it just started, I mean, to be honest, it could just be because the songs are getting worse. I mean, I like to think not, but who knows? But it's then just like interest kind of dips a little bit. And I think having spoken to a fair few artists, that kind of seems to be like a bit of a common theme. So I think there is definitely a balance to be struck between hype and momentum.
It depends. I think if you can back up your last song with something just as good, because for me, from an A&R perspective, if I see someone's name that I recognise, I already know I already have an idea of whether I think it's going to be a good track or not.
Yeah, sure.
So when your name comes up or other people's names, I think I'm going to put that on the A-list straight away. You just know, don't you?
Yeah, of course you do.
As long as you're consistent as an artist and you have that kind of consistency with your genre, style, and
production.
And production, production.
But I think that's all more of a brand thing. So that kind of like all ties into like a brand. I'd say. I mean, sorry, I don't mean to contradict you or anything, but I'm just saying, like,
get out.
Yeah, I know. Invite me on your podcast, and then I go, well, not sure about that, but I'd say for me that comes down to like your artist brand. So if you've got like a particular sound. Rather than like a consistency thing, but maybe I misunderstood.
But there's people that have uploaded songs that have sounded really, really good and then just fallen off the radar and then won't upload for another 5-6 months. Probably like myself.
So it's more of a consistency in the releases as opposed to a quality or brand.
Yeah, sure. But it has to be both.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah. I agree. I misunderstood what you were saying, but I think I agree with that. but I don't know, like how from your guys' perspective, like how often would you like to see artists releasing?
I don't think it matters from my perspective. I don't think it, as long as it's. I think a lot of the artists that we spoke to in the past on the station or whatever, 4 to 6 weeks seems to be something that people say in regards to releasing music. You're saying basically double that, like every 12 weeks.
Yeah.
So it probably just depends on the artist. I would rather an artist personally, not that it's got anything to do with me at all, but I would rather an artist release a track a quarter and it'd be brilliant, rather than go, right, well, we've created this track, we're done with it now, we just want to get it out. And it's like, well, is it gonna, because essentially, like, obviously everything that we get to Future Hits is fantastic and we're really happy to receive them, but you guys are, as great as we are, obviously you are looking for bigger, right? So you want it to be on Radio 1, you want it to be on Capital, you want it to be on Radio X, whatever. So you want to take that level up. So the tracks have got to hit a certain standard if you want to be getting to that. So you want to be releasing like hit singles if you really can be. You don't. You'd rather wait for someone to create something that you can be a really good single, stand out on its own, rather than potentially being a B track or an album track. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So I think it depends on the artist and what their release plan is. But I mean, we have some artists who do send us tracks every couple of months, and some of them are great, some of them might not be as good as the other ones or whatever. But yeah, I mean, the tracks that you've submitted, the 5 you've submitted, we've played on the air straight away.
That's been appreciated. So thank you.
And I said when with I'm Coming Home, I think that's my favourite track you've released, because I think that could have been. Do you remember Sam Fender at Glastonbury?
Yeah.
I had that vision for that track.
Oh, thank you very much.
So like having people sing that back. Can you imagine being at a festival and people singing that back to you? Like that was I feel like that could be such an epic festival track.
It's so funny you say that, because that's probably my least favourite.
Oh.
So it's always the way, isn't it? It's always.
But I just heard that, and when I heard that, I remember saying it on my show, and I was like, that could be a festival track. That.
No, I appreciate it, mate. That's very kind of you. But yeah, I agree. I agree with what you're saying, and I think it kind of touches on what we were talking about earlier. And it's in terms of releasing music is expensive as well.
Yeah.
So you don't. I think for a lot of people, especially in the current like economic situation that we're in at the moment as well, like you don't just want to. This is another thing in like the whole like album versus singles thing as well. So obviously, as an unsigned, my personal view is you want to release as many singles as you can, because
who's going to listen to a whole album off the bat?
So if no one knows you, but equally as well as that, it
costs a lot.
If you just release an album, it's just you've just dropped like what.
How much?
Thousands,
exactly.
Thousands of pounds, and how much content could that have been?
To
lead you for a year or two.
Exactly. So that's another thing. It's funny you touched on the 4 to 6 weeks thing as well, because, like you say, currently it's my release plan is 8 weeks. So I try and do it every 8 weeks, because I feel like that gives me enough time to like write in between, have a bit of a break, and promo the song well enough. But and then I felt like that's not been enough. But it's just
not enough time in between.
Exactly. Right. So
I must say though, I feel like artists do have this 4 to 6 figure in their head, most of them that we speak to, but I also think they feel the pressure of that as well.
100%,
I think there is too much to do. Like, you do have to make sure it's all distributed properly, all the sync platforms, and then obviously making the most of promotion afterwards as well, and making the most of that content, and then you've got to prep for your next one.
Well, yeah, I think the shorter you make that period, the more relentless it is, right? I think like it's. I think to be honest with you, it's just trying to see what works for you, because it's not necessarily the same for everyone, right? Like, I know people that have released once every 6 months and their songs have been like unbelievable. I mean, in terms of numbers, their numbers have been incredible. I know people that have released every 4 weeks and their numbers have also been incredible, and then vice versa. I know people that have not been as good, and it's I think as an unsigned, it's so important to shop around for what works, because the reality is that you don't have the team or the finances that these big artists on labels have.
Yeah.
So they have, well, I'd imagine they have like a very structured thing for each of their artists, and they're like, big budgets. So it can kind of follow the same framework every time. Whereas for like an unsigned, you're relying more on things like algorithms and stuff like that to kind of pick up a track.
Yeah.
Whereas, so it's just trying and seeing what works. I think personally, and that's not just in terms of releasing. It's in terms of sound. It's in like, you can have something that's on brand, but it doesn't sound the same as anything else. You can have like, there's ways of going about that, and yeah, it's just shopping around, seeing what you like. Does it work? Yes. If it doesn't, no worries. You tried. Back to the drawing board. There's so much pressure. I think people put themselves under too much pressure for, if it doesn't work, then if I can't do it now, then I'm never going to be able to do it. But
yeah, it is. I think it is the pressure that people put themselves under. I think that goes for artists, it goes for presenters, it goes for
everyone. It's exactly the same as you guys, right?
I think it's the case that if it's, everyone needs to have sort of, set goals, and we want to be doing this. I mean, obviously with us getting this studio, we've got certain targets that we want to hit each month and make it a sustainable business and all that sort of stuff. And with the station, obviously that's growing all the time, and we've got things in place, but then we don't want to turn around and go, right, well, we want to be competing with Radio 1 and that, because it's not going to happen. So we just need to make sure that we're being like as sustainable, but also setting little targets to hit each milestone in a decent amount of time. But with certain artists that we've spoken,
What's wrong with us today? We're both coughing.
Yeah, I know. all of it.
Yeah, I know, sorry.
We'll need lem sips.
Sorry, Kieran. This is going to take a bit of editing, this, mate.
Just acknowledge the elephant in the room and then we can carry on.
Yeah. With the artists, some of the artists that we've spoken to, I know that it'll be a case that they'll go down the road and they'll be like, right, we want to release every 4 to 6 weeks, get a plan together, go, right, that's what we want to do. But they haven't either got that back catalogue there, so they're having to write and record a brand new song that's going to be released in...
And then it doesn't mean anything really to you when you're writing that quickly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And they're putting themselves under so much pressure that it's just a case of just getting it ready enough to go out. And it's like, oh God, like, we've released that. And it's like, is that, like you were saying, is that on brand? Is that really what you wanted? Is it something, could you have made it sound even better? If you held on to it for a bit longer?
It's so funny because I feel like telling Granny how to suck eggs here, I guess it's kind of that's my favourite saying. But I feel like you guys kind of have exactly the same considerations to be making as the artist as well. It's like a fledgling sort of, this is being like a fledgling idea, this exactly the same kind of considerations that you need to make as what I'd be kind of thinking about as well. So
exactly.
You understand the pain. You guys get it, you get it.
I think the thing, we've been around it for a while. Like, obviously, Abi is an artist in her own right anyway.
Yeah, of course.
I never have been, but I've been around artists for long enough to sort of know. And obviously, we're doing other podcasts and radio shows and stuff. It's like, we understand the trials and tribulations that you guys go through just to get your music out there. Yeah. So we get it, is what I'm saying, basically.
And everyone appreciates that. Like, there's not really that many big champions of unsigned music, and you guys smash it. So
the home of UK emerging artists.
There it is. Love that. Heard it here first. Brandon. Nice.
Right, shall we have a quick break? Yeah?
Yeah,
let's get some Lemsip.
Yeah, we'll get some Lemsip, and then we'll come back, and then we're going to talk about how to put on your own gig. Yeah?
Sounds good to me.
We'll be back.
The Soundcheck podcast is recorded at Future Hit Studio in Southend, and our lovely studio is available for hire, for rehearsals, recording, for podcasts like this. Radio shows, if you fancy it.
Yeah, so come down, hire the studio, and to book it out, they go to
futurehits.co.uk/studio.
You do, and guess what? If you're a patron, you get a discount.
No brainer.
Welcome back to part 2 of, what was that?
Hi. Just saying hi.
Hi.
We're back.
Welcome back to part 2 of the Soundcheck podcast. We're here with Jack Foss, AB Violet, I'm Matt Wherry. We're talking about gigs now. right? So you've got a gig coming up that we will discuss shortly, and the process of how to put on your first gig, because I think that'd be useful to other people. And I'll tell you about the first couple of gigs that I put on, and because it's very difficult.
The horror stories for you.
The horror stories.
You sure you want to relive that right now?
Well, I think it'll be helpful for the listeners and the watchers of the podcast, because it was a hell of a learning curve and very expensive, because I didn't do it the right way the first time round. So the question you asked me when we were off air or off camera, was have I put gigs on as a promoter and stuff, right? So I've obviously got my unsigned radio show that I've done for years now. And as part of that, I wanted to start putting on some gigs. So I put on a gig in Chelmsford and another gig in Southend. Abby was on the lineup in Southend, which is where we properly met. And then this all started. But the gig before that, I done one in Chelmsford, and I didn't want to, for some reason, there's only a couple of good venues in Chelmsford, like music venues. One of them is Hotbox, which we've done a gig at. We were there on Saturday to support, to go and watch friends of ours, and then we've got a gig in January. But there wasn't really, but because it was my first gig, I don't think they really. Well, they didn't trust me, but they didn't know me.
They didn't take you very seriously.
No, they were like, "Oh, we don't know who you are. Like, you can have a Tuesday night or something like that." But they didn't really come back to me at that stage. So I had to go and find another venue in Chelmsford. But I had no gear, I had no equipment, anything like that. I didn't know Abby at that point, because otherwise that would have been a flipping lifesaver.
We're all kitted out now.
But I didn't know anyone, so I went to. I think I had a bit of money. I had a bit of some money that I'd come into, basically.
Like a pot, yeah.
I had a pot of money, and I was like, cool. Well, I can use this towards that, and it's free money. What can go wrong? I'll make a profit. Of course I will. Really naively, and I spoke to a couple of audio hire places, and they basically charged me like £1,500 for the sound equipment, which. So I was like, sure, that's fine, right? So I was like, okay, cool. So the venue was nothing, and then I could take all the tickets on the door. I didn't have to pay the venue anything. And in my head, I was like, cool. Well, I need to then sell X amount of tickets to cover the costs, right? And they were like, oh, the cap, I can't remember the cap, but say it was like 150 cap or whatever. And I was like, okay, cool. If I sell the tickets for like 14, 15 quid a ticket, I'll still make decent money if we sell it out. So I was like, okay, cool. That's what we'll do. And I advertised it on local stations that I was on as part of Unsigned, because it's a syndicated show. So I was promoting it that way. I was having the artists promote it. We had local artists playing the show as well. And I was sort of like, okay, cool. I'm quite confident in that. But as the tickets went on sale, it didn't really
gain any traction.
Didn't really gain much traction. And I had to get to a point. You think I'm stressed running gigs now, Abs, right?
I didn't know how much money you spent on that first one.
Mate, that is a stinker.
So, mate, it was terrible. So I knew I was losing money on it, right? Yeah. So I was like, and because they saw me for a naive guy and was like, oh, we're just going to rinse him. So, and that's basically what completely happened. But they did turn up with like massive desk, like all the sound equipment that you could ever want, obviously. But I think they thought they were packing out a festival. And they almost tried to charge me for a man in a van to come and like take the gear off at the end of the night. And I was like, no, I'll just help the geezer put it back. Like, anyway, so I'm not a fan of theirs. But that happened. And then we ended up getting like 60 through the door. I think it was like a Wednesday night, 60 through the door on a Wednesday. And if I had been less naive, I'd have been like, okay, cool. Well, I'll have to get cheaper equipment, make sure it all sounds cool. I could have probably borrowed equipment from people that I might have known, but I just didn't think. I just went, right.
Isn't your dad a sound engineer?
No, he's an MD. He's not. He hasn't got his own equipment.
Fair enough.
So I was like, okay, cool. So
that would have made it even more of a stinker there.
No, that's not what happened. But I was like, okay, cool. Well, that is what it is. And I had to basically say to myself, right, well, I've made a loss here. Like, I had that money there that was essentially I was just going to spend on this. And if I'm not going to turn a profit on this one, it is what it is. So on that first gig, I just said to the artist, look, I'm not going to make any money on this. I'm really sorry. I'll pay for your drinks. I'll put like a couple £100 behind the bar or whatever, and then sorted. So they rinsed that, obviously, and then that was fine for the night. And they were doing us a bit of a favour because I knew a couple of them and stuff. Yeah. So that was that gig. My second mistake was I then...
was doing a second gig.
2 weeks later.
Oh.
2 weeks later. So I'd done the Chelmsford gig. Can't remember the exact dates, but they were in May, weren't they? So I'd done like a gig in Chelmsford on whatever it was, the second week in May. And then I'd done, the first gig in Chelmsford on that, whenever that was. And then 2 weeks later, done the gig in Southend. The gig in Southend, I didn't have to pay for any equipment because it was all in-house. I only had to pay 75 quid for the sound engineer. And the tickets were still about 10, 12 quid or whatever. But I was like, any money I make from this, any money I make from this has got to go back to paying off what I just spent on the flipping sound.
I don't mind. I got a free pizza.
You got a free pizza, but I was, and I
That's the payment. That's good enough payment.
I did have to pay one of the artists as well. So I would like, because
Hang on a minute. Hang on a minute.
she's got half. It's fine. We've got business together now. It's fine.
It's too far gone now.
But you know who I had to pay, and they were very good.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
So yeah, so
are we allowed to say who it was, or is that kind of?
I'll tell you after.
Okay.
But anyway, but from that gig, if I'd done that gig alone, I would have made money.
Yeah.
It was the wrong venue. The first gig was the wrong venue with the wrong hire company, and I just got stung. So that is my horror story of how not to put a gig on. I got posters printed. I did put a couple of posters out, stuff like that. But I felt I took a lot of the pressure on myself as a promoter to bring the artist to the gig. I didn't necessarily put too much onus on the artists, which again I've learned from that. So I had a horror story on the first gig. The second gig was better, and it's not just because Abi was performing, but that was better.
That deserves a nice little sassy hair flip there. Yeah, boom.
So I think that's probably not a very good way to start.
Yeah, I'd imagine. Yeah, getting stung is not ideal, mate. But I think to be honest with you, I wish I had loads and loads of insight. But so obviously I'm putting on this gig in March at the Camden Club, and 22nd of March, Camden Club. See you there.
Tickets on Eventbrite.
Yeah, nice. So basically, I think the way that I'm trying to think of it is because it's the first one that I'm putting on. I'm not trying to make a profit. I'm just trying to break even.
Yeah. So
I think for me, and especially because of who I am, and in terms of I'm not like a big name. My name alone isn't just going to get people through the door. I want to try and make it cheap. The ticket's cheap enough that people aren't gonna look at it and go, ooh, but it's also gonna make sure that I'm not in the red, if that makes sense. So
also cheap enough because the drinks at Camden Club are a little bit pricey.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. Right, don't discourage me from coming.
Great
I've
drinks,
sold
though,
about
great
20
music.
tickets so far, Alf, so that's...
well, that's not a bad start. But what I was going to say, let's start from the beginning. So how did you decide on a venue?
So basically, it was... Again, I'd love to say that it was, I did some mad mathematical calculations, but it was essentially the Camden Club was one of about 6 venues that replied to my email. So
that's fair enough. This is what this is for, though. This is to help people understand how to get in with venues and stuff. So that's fair enough. So they were one of the ones.
Exactly. So I feel like I'm doing them a bit of a disservice there. I've narrowed it down to about 5 or 6 venues that I was happy to play in that were of A, an appropriate size, B, an appropriate standard.
Yeah.
And it essentially, they were just like one of the only ones that replied to me. So
what was the sort of capacity you were looking for then?
Well, I was looking for about 100 to 120 to start with. The Camden Club is significantly bigger than that.
Right.
But I guess you've got to be ambitious, don't you? It'll be fine.
Just go seated. Just go seated.
Yeah. Seated to really loud indie rock music, just blow people's brains whilst I sat down. But to be honest with you, I'm not actually. I feel like, and it's kind of what I said about the song, the songs earlier, because it's the first one. I feel like all my mates and like all my family friends and people that I roughly know will kind of be up for coming. Yeah. So I feel like. I know it's an ambitious task to try and fill it, but if people are going to come to anyone, they're going to probably come to the first one as well. So but that is the world's worst advice. Don't bank on that if you're putting an event on, please. So please don't.
No, but it comes because you're performing as well, right?
Oh yeah.
Right. So people are going to not just be coming for you as the promoter; they're going to be coming for you as the artist. And you've got a gig in January, I think, haven't you? Prior to that, but other than that, are you going to keep it pretty free to then lead up to that momentum?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm not actually playing the January date anymore. So.
Well, we can cut that out.
Yeah. But no, I'm trying to keep the calendar pretty free because
it makes sense.
Like you said, it's again hype sort of thing, isn't it? So you don't want to spread yourself too thin and then can't get people through the door.
Without going into specifics, because I don't expect you to, but what's the deal with the venue? Because a lot of venues go, as an example, some venues that we've worked with will go, right, it is 20% of the door plus 20% for something else. Or they'll turn around and go, right, well, yeah, we'll take 50% of the door, but you haven't got to pay for anything. Or you've got to cover the security, which is £100, but other than that, you're fine. And then another one we have is literally, you haven't really got to pay for anything minus the sound engineer. What's the sort of general feel for this one?
Just quickly to touch back on something that I've just remembered as well.
Yeah,
is that the Camden Club, they also said, I forgot what I was going to say now. Please edit that out. Sorry, edit. There was something that you said that was actually quite important, and I've just forgotten what it was. Oh yeah, like the Camden Club thing as well is the reason why I like it. It was another great. Oh, you know what? Just cancel that. Scratch that. We'll just go with what you said because I can't remember what I was talking about now. Sorry. So the deal that I got with the venue was actually really, really good because that was it. Basically, I said to them that instead of I wanted to be on a lineup, I said that I wanted to put on my own night.
Right.
So I was like willing to hire the venue. So I think that helped me get their initial attention because it was probably more
less hassle for them.
Exactly. Yeah. So that probably helped as well. So ties in nicely to your question just then of what's the deal that I'm getting. So I have to pay for the venue hire, which is actually not as expensive as you think. In fact, I don't mind. It was £120 to hire the venue.
That's really reasonable.
Really, really reasonable.
Yeah.
Which they refund if I get 100 people through the door.
Right. Okay.
And then it's like £75 for security and £175 for the sound man.
Right. Okay.
So all in, it's like $350. Yeah, $350. So that's super reasonable. The way that I look at that is then, if I sell 35 tickets, I've recouped the price of the venue. So it's not every decision I make financially, I put it down to the number of tickets that I'd have to sell to recoup the investment. Yeah. So
it's pretty much our model.
Yeah, 100%. But we've learnt that over the last 2 years of doing what we do. So, and it's try not to give yourself massive outlays in the beginning and having too large an expectations. It's what is the line for me to break even?
Yeah, exactly.
Anything else is a bonus.
Exactly. And, like I've done the maths of how many I'd need to sell without selling out to recoup some sort of money in order to pay people properly and things like that. I think, the deal that I was getting from the venue is really good. So that was obviously another massive,
incentive.
Yeah, exactly. And I didn't have to hire my own equipment, unlike you did on your first one.
That was a massive mistake I made. We've never made the same mistake twice.
I would always, I would always recommend putting on a gig in a music venue. Yeah. So that you don't have to. Sorry, I know that sounds so patronising.
No, you're 100% right. Like me now, completely agree with you. Where were you 2 years ago when I needed you, Jack?
Yeah, sorry, mate.
And also, I really don't want to name names or make this obvious, but we have gone to music venues where there's been certain equipment that you'd expect to be at a music venue that isn't there.
I mean, exactly. Reading the list of equipment is
Jack
like
specs,
a
please,
massive,
people.
Yeah, I mean, there are not just gigs. There are so many sharks in music. So many sharks in the music industry that will rinse you for everything that they possibly can, and you get nothing in return. And I've learned that the hard way. with, you know, like things like PR and stuff like that. And I think that I know this is radio, so technically it kind of counts as PR, but obviously don't mean you guys. I mean, like, in terms of like working with people that have promised you the world and then not really returned anything, and you're kind of confused about what they kind of did in the first place.
I think it goes with any sort of company in music. You're going to have the good ones and the bad ones. You're going to have good promoters, bad promoters. You're going to have good PR companies, and you're going to have bad PR companies.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're spending money, I keep listing things, but if you're spending money, read everything.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're, because nothing in music comes for granted, right? It's such a fickle industry that anything can happen.
You guys need to make sure you're getting a service for what you're paying for.
Exactly. And I think I was lucky because the Camden Club have just recently, well, it's quite a new venue for starters, or it's been like refurbed or something, and they've put a lot of money into the sound system. So that was another really big incentive for putting the gig on there, is that it's going to sound good.
Yeah.
And, you know, as an artist, you need anything to make you sound a little bit better than you actually are always helps, you know. So so that was another I kind of forgotten what the original question was here, but
it's all right. It's all useful stuff.
It was all about a deal. It was all about a deal. So it was a case of getting with the Camden Club and the deal that you got with them. And was it a case that getting the deal with the Camden Club and going, right, well, I know that I need to sell this tickets, and that's why my tickets are going to be £10 a ticket, because I know that that's going to get me to 35.
Yeah.
Was that how you set the ticket prices?
Yeah. So I think there was a lot of considerations. It was, number one, recouping the money on the venue.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, I want to be able to pay everyone fairly, and that includes the other bands that I've got supporting and artists, the people in my band, and the person that I'm just going to pay to do the door. So you want to make sure that everyone's getting paid fairly for their time, because like I said earlier, I can't sit here and criticize myself not getting paid fairly if I'm not paying other people fairly.
Yeah.
Then there was things like, you know, did I want to be able to buy merch? That was another consideration. There was other little bits and pieces, like how many guest list tickets would I need to put on?
I think you can keep that decision until quite near the end.
Yeah, correct. But I've accounted for it already. So
it's planning ahead again.
There you go.
Yeah.
And I think for me, the biggest thing is, like I said a minute ago, is because I'm not a big name, I would rather the venue be full than me make a profit.
Yeah.
Because number one, it looks good.
Of course, yeah.
And number two, it just makes for way more fun. Like playing on stage when there's like, it's a sold out venue is just so fun.
Yeah.
Because, you know, it just is, isn't it? As I'm sure everyone can imagine, everyone can attest to. But so the main consideration was, how much can I charge people to make sure that the tickets are cheap, so they actually come in the first place, and I don't go in the red. And where without fees, they're £11, and I feel like
that's about the mark for London.
Yeah, exactly.
On
That's
the lower
less
end.
than 2 pints. So that's my justification.
That's still scary to me that a pint is that expensive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there you go. That's less than 2 beers. So
how did you decide on the ticket provider? Sorry, Abs, I'm just like butting in, because there's
it's asking all the admin questions.
I am.
Ticket provider, venue, ticket prices.
The thing though, like for me, if you're putting on a gig, this is stuff that you'd want to know, right? So it's a case that, because I've used Skiddle before. A couple of the venues we've used Dice, and
I looked at Dice.
I find Dice a bit annoying because it always asks my location. I have to re-log in every time, and it has to be the app.
Yeah. Do you know what it basically was? When I was setting it up, I was like, I looked at a few, and it just so happened that Eventbrite was the easiest one to set up.
It is easy,
and it was just so simple. Like, I paid $19.99, and then I had unlimited access to all the features for this one show. Where I didn't have to pay a subscription.
Yeah.
And Dice, I've tried to do Dice. I think Dice is quite good because it kind of shows you. The only thing about Eventbrite is that you see the price of the ticket, then you go to pay and it's a bit more expensive, and you're like, oh, why's that? But it's because of the fee that
Yeah.
Which is probably why it's so cheap to use. And then Dice, I'm not sure they either don't put fees in or they just include it in the price of the ticket.
It's included in the ticket price. So I think it's a case that if you're selling, because we've got a gig in January in Hotbox in Chelmsford, and we've put the tickets at £8 for that. But every ticket has a quid taken off of it, essentially. So the first 100 tickets, I think, maybe a bit more than that, but the first 100 tickets are £1 a ticket that Dice just take. Yeah. And then after that, I think it then reduces in price or whatever.
But I looked at Dice because I've used Dice before, and it looks quite cool. Because it looks quite, I feel like Dice looks quite professional because it's got an app.
It's got an app and it's accessible and all that.
It's quite good. It looks quite, the branding of Dice looks quite cool. But I went to do it and then I had to like fill out a form, do some other things, and I was a bit like, this is such a faff. Yeah. I just want to be able to just do it, get it done, boom. Also, I've used Eventbrite before for some things as well, so I kind of knew what the crack was. But, so that's another short story long there for you. Yeah.
Well, I've used Skiddle as well, and Skiddle was pretty good. That was quite accessible.
Yeah, I actually didn't look at Skiddle, but I feel like I should have. But
no, it's as long as it works for you, mate. That's good.
It's it's a bit like DSPs, right? Not DSPs, a bit like distributors. Like they're all kind of the same.
One of the same, yeah.
Little tiny differences between all of them.
Yeah,
they're all same but different, basically. So
lineup,
pretty much.
How have you decided on a lineup?
Or have you decided on a lineup?
Because, actually, I've seen in the group recently. You've like put it out there, haven't you?
Yeah. So
you haven't got to say who it is in case we don't want to like have an exclusive or anything, but just how.
No, we do want to have an exclusive if you're willing to give us one.
No, I mean, I've not really decided anything at this stage.
Fair enough.
However, one thing I've seen, big reveal. No, one thing I've seen that works quite well is that I'm probably for like the opener, I'm gonna put out something on TikTok and Instagram and be like, hey, if you're an independent artist in London, I'm putting on a gig at the Camden Club, and also Maisie Peters played there the other week, which was quite cool. So that's quite a big. I'm definitely going to say that. So it's be like, I'm putting on this gig. It's going to be a good night. If you want to come and support, duet this or whatever. Because I feel like there's a lot of gigging opportunities in London, but sometimes there's not a lot of like good gigging opportunities, if that makes sense. So because I'm making such a big thing of paying everyone, I'm going to be like, this is a paid opportunity, which sometimes you don't get. And hopefully that gains some traction. So I'm probably going to decide the opener off that. Yeah. I've got one band in mind who are some friends of mine. And then the third, just TBC. I think that's it. Yeah, okay. Exactly. By the time this goes out, I probably would have.
Yeah, that's fair
exactly.
Enough.
So we can like edit this, overlay it like a stop. if we know stop right now, these are the bands. Yeah. Sort of
there you go, Kieran. More work for you.
There you go. Sorry, Kieran. But, yeah. So I think basically I've decided through who I'm friends with, people that I think might be able to help sell some tickets.
Well, that's where it comes down to. I think it's very it's difficult to decide on a lineup, and you have to take the pool of the artist to see how many people they're actually going to bring through the door.
I think it's the problem is right. Like I used to get really annoyed with a lot of promoters.
Here we go. Here comes the juicy bit.
that would only pick. Yeah, I know. I used to get really annoyed with a lot of promoters that would only put certain bands on if they could sell X number of tickets, and I know a lot of people get really frustrated with it because it feels a bit gatekeepery. But I think this has kind of helped me appreciate a little bit more, is that it is for them. For me, it's actually a bit easier because, like I say, I'm not trying to make a massive profit from this at all.
Yeah, you're not a business.
Exactly. I'm not a business. Yeah. It's just to put on a gig. Whereas for them, they've got to pay salaries and stuff. So I kind of sympathise with it a bit more. I still kind of turn my nose up at it a bit because, I'm all for the artists and all that sort of stuff. But I get it, if that makes sense.
Well, I think that's how we approach it. Like we are obviously artist oriented first and foremost. That's why we exist. But even from our perspective, we don't want an empty room, not just for ourselves, but for the artists.
Yeah, exactly.
So there is a balance to strike.
And I think you know, as the promoter, which I guess that I kind of am for this event, you are taking on costs and responsibilities,
and risk,
right? And risk, exactly. So you have to guarantee yourself that there's going to be people there.
Otherwise, you end up nearly $2,000 out of pocket.
Yeah,
that was just me being stupid.
Yeah. You have to make sure that there's a PA there. Otherwise,
100%. Rule one, make sure they've got a backline.
Yeah, exactly. But, you know, I like, luckily, I'm in a place in my career where I've met a few really cool people that I get on with and know that they will bring people.
Yeah.
So that's, I'm kind of like cheesing it a little bit in that sense.
That's not cheesing it at all. I think that is probably the way to do it. Like that's
we've certainly learned that, because even from events that we put on like last year, like we had people geographically might not have been the perfect fit for the gig, but selfishly we wanted them there because we wanted to see them play. But it wasn't. But the numbers weren't necessarily through the door. So it was one of those ones again where we're like, we haven't covered the costs because we didn't bring enough people in. But we've learned that lesson again, because like you're obviously in any industry, but when we're trying to do stuff, you're obviously learning all the time. Especially when you've dropped as much money as I have on it. But with the one that we're doing,
just to point out, that's not like a normal.
No, it's not.
That is a lot of money. That is not a normal.
That was bad planning. But if you get, someone could be as stupid as me. You never know. For the gig that we're putting on in January, again, geographical locations come down to it. It's a local gig with local bands, and they've all promoted it like as best they possibly can. So
I feel like we need to just pick our reputation up off the floor a little bit and say we did sell out that gig in January. Yeah. Like, we're not terrible for it. It's just losing money all the time.
It's already sold out.
Sold out in 12 hours, yeah.
That's so ledge.
Ledge.
Oh, you said
Hot Box in Chelmsford, yeah. We've got Cardinals headlining, we've got Rolled Up Sleeves and Dharma Hounds.
Unreal, that's class.
So that sold out in 12 hours. And the thing is with that, the ticket link went live at midday. We didn't announce the gig until 7 p.m. that night.
It was already nearly sold out.
And the tickets were gone by midnight.
Wow.
So it was 8 minutes past midnight. Most of the tickets had gone. So it was just, and with them it was like, you can. How many guest list places are there? There's 5 between everyone. It was like, right, okay.
Gone. Yeah.
So
that's that.
There isn't one.
So it's one of those things that I'm not saying that we're going to sell out every gig. I think we've got it right on this one. And we set everything out properly. Like when we were putting all the sort of contracts together for it and all that sort of stuff, we were like, right, this is what and we're very transparent with what the costs were because it's not going to be, although we've sold it out because of fees and all that.
Yeah.
Like, we're not making anything out of it, but then the artists hopefully get like, I don't know, 100 quid each or something like that.
But I think that you guys can do that, right? Because people trust you. Like, I know that if I was
they might not after this.
3 years ago. It was 3 years ago.
I swear I've changed. I'm a new man. Never.
Abby's looking after things these days.
But like, yeah, you guys can get away with that because, like, if I was doing a gig with you guys, I know that you have my best interests at heart, which is not necessarily the same for a lot of
profit-making organisations, I suppose.
Well, we'd like to make a profit.
Yeah.
We're not, but we would like to.
Let's just throw it as like others.
Okay.
Yeah. Everyone else sucks.
Yeah. But something like that. There we go. Joking. Future Hits Radio. Everyone else sucks.
Please don't put that in.
No, we're gonna put that in. That'll be a real.
But yeah, I just think that, you know, as long as you're not trying to screw people over, and as long as you're being fair and transparent, then nobody can really argue with you. It's the same as everything, right? If you set expectations, then if you outline clearly what you're trying to get out of it, your expectations and stuff, then if it's other people's onus to kind of agree to play or whatever. Yeah. So.
Like I say, I think we've learned that moving forward, and obviously we had a good gig. I know that was in correlation with Hot Vox and stuff. We had a good gig on Thursday. Got one in January. We've got other people wanting to do gigs for us next year. Awesome. So, you know, it's
keep busy.
Yeah, very.
Yeah, awesome.
For you as an artist, though, what was the stage you knew that you wanted to put your own event on rather than use a promoter? Was that just through bad experiences with promoters in the past?
Yeah, it's such a good question because I've not really thought about an answer. So I like that. I guess what made me want to do it was the fact that I think it was like more of a control thing, you know. Like I guess like number one, because a lot of, especially in London, I feel like the gigs aren't necessarily that well curated sometimes. Like you can end up on a lineup with, I mean, don't get me wrong, like the other bands could be like fantastic, or artists could be fantastic, but they might not necessarily
relate to
you.
Yeah.
So I feel like when I say control, I don't mean like I'm a control freak, but it was like, you know, I could make the night actually make sense for number one.
For you and your fan base.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Number two, I feel like it's easier to promote it if I'm putting it on myself, because people know that it's helping me directly. And what else did I do? Because putting on a night as well lets you kind of choose where you play as well, and like it means like I got to like play at the Camden club, which I might, you know, promoters that I've worked with previously haven't had that venue on their list of venues, and I think I wanted to like just give myself a challenge as well. I've never done it before, so I wanted to test the waters. You know, it's like what we spoke about earlier. It's trying new things, seeing if they work. You know, it might be an absolute failure. I might not sell 50 tickets. I would like to think I would, but I might not. And then it's, you know, rejigging it all. So next time I might play at a smaller venue. I might have more supports or like that, all that sort of thing. And I think I'm such a advocate of just trying different things that I just wanted to give myself a new challenge, and here we are. This is the next step, I guess.
I feel like we're going to have a follow-up episode to find out
how did it go? Here with no hair, like, oh my God.
What's wrong with that?
Staring into the
And now
distance.
you know how Matt lost.
It's literally that. And last question I was going to ask you in regards to promoting the gig itself, like what's going to be your method to do that? Because obviously you've got a very good like TikTok following and stuff. You've got like 1 million likes on there and stuff. So how is it a case that what is going to
flick?
You can flick yours. But what is going to be your means of promotion? Because I think that hasn't been something we necessarily have touched on just yet. But just quickly, what is going to be your like promotion plan?
I think just posting about it consistently, reminding people that it's happening. I think there's definitely like a timing aspect to it as well. There's certainly a sweet spot. Like if I just start going ham at it now, there's kind of no point because people don't know what they're doing in March. But if I leave it too late, everyone will have plans.
I think you'll go back to that 8 weeks again, though.
Maybe. Like I feel I don't know what I'm doing in 2 months, so don't know if anyone else will. So maybe that's the sweet spot. But you know, it's just like finding the right time to do it. I think just being consistent, reminding people all the time. Like when it gets close to the time, I might slide into a few DMs and be like, "Hey, I've got a few tickets."
So be all social media based, do you think?
I think so,
Right.
And I'm thinking about like getting out and doing some busking to sell some tickets, but I don't know. That's a very fresh idea. I don't know if
I think your idea of getting the support in.
Yeah.
I know obviously you want to pay everyone, but I think if that goes viral, that would be a big, a big almost like a competition to be a part of.
Exactly. I'm not opposed to running competitions and discounts and all that sort of stuff. If people apply to that, like I'd be like, well, I know, number one, they can come if they've applied to it. So I could be like, well, here's like a £5 ticket or whatever. And I've again budgeted space for giving a certain number of discounted tickets and all that sort of stuff. So I've thought it through a bit.
Mate, it sounds like you've got it down, to be quite honest. It sounds like, obviously, with the experience you've had from doing gigs for other promoters, you've obviously learnt that, and you've got your head screwed on, so I think you'll be all right.
Or are you just an overthinker?
Oh, there it is. There it is. Cut to me playing it now. That was brilliant.
Right, to finish that was very good. To finish off the podcast before we have a couple of acoustic songs from you, could you just tell everyone where they can find you and where they can find tickets for your gig in March?
Sure. So I am at Jack Foz Music on any social media. If you type my name and type that into anywhere, you'll find me. Might be lurking under a rock or something, but yeah, it's all the tickets are in links in my bio. You can DM me. Might give you a cheeky discount if you reach out. You never know, but I might not. Who knows? But yeah, at Jack Foz Music, Jack Foz on Spotify, and hopefully catch you there.
Good stuff. Right, well, that has been the first episode of the Soundcheck podcast. I've been Matt Wherry.
I've been Abby or AB Violet, who knows?
Well, if you don't know,
we'll figure it out at some
point.
point. By the end of the season 1, we would have sorted it.
We would have got there. All right, cool. Thank you very much for watching. Subscribe on YouTube, like us, and all that sort of good stuff on Spotify. And we will see you on the next one. Thank you very much to Jack Foz for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Kieran. Thank you for Kieran.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Universe, for Kieran.
Thank you for you.
Thanks, Kieran. Thanks, Abs. We'll see you on the next one.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Tell us about your events, right? If you've got an event coming up and you want us to give it a bit of promotion on air, online, on the app, and on our socials, you can do that for £15, flat fee, £15, 4 weeks before your event. We'll get a radio ad for you created, but we'll need a voice note from you and ideally an instrumental track. That will go on our app on our website as well.
But guess what?
What?
It's free for patrons.
It is free for patrons. So go and sign up there as well. But also go on our app. Go and download that. Future Hits Radio app on Google Play Store and the App Store. Go and download it. See some more events.
Also, thanks for listening and thanks for watching.
Oh yeah, cheers.